Hey again guys, Lex here, and today I'm bringing you another build update, though this will likely be the last one for this build in the league, and I know a lot of you guys watching have followed my Warbringer shield build that could clear the late end game, but after the second win 3 changes, that build was pretty heavily nerfed. It could still conquer all the tier 4 endgame stuff, juiced maps, simulacrums, etc., but you just weren't as invulnerable as before. So, as I mentioned in my most recent video, I made the switch to Titan, and I gotta say, post second win 3 nerf, I think this is actually the stronger Ascendancy now, at least for this build. Not only are we tankier by a huge margin, to be honest, we also have more AoE and more damage overall, though I do at times miss the crazy clearing support from Warcaller's Bellow. That Corpse Explode effect is a hard one to replace from the Warbringer Ascendancy, that much I'll admit. But after a few tweaks, I miss it a lot less these days. I'm gonna go over what's different with the skills in this one, a little bit on the passive skill tree. It's honestly mostly the same as the Warbringer build, but I'll also go into a little bit more detail on how to tackle boss fights, because a lot of you were asking about that on my previous build video, and I'll give you more of like a step-by-step this time around. That's about it. Let's get to it. Alright, so skill gems. I'm just going to go over the important stuff this time around, and we'll get started right away with shield charge. I've explained the hell out of this ability already in my last build video, and we're pretty much using it in the same way, so if you want a more detailed explanation on how and when to use this, check out that last one. But yeah, overall this is our best way to travel around the map. It is faster than sprint with how it is currently socketed, and our best way to close gaps between fights, you know, like initiating on a group or traveling between groups, etc., especially when you have shield wave from a Fortifying Cry in the bank. Just keep in mind on this Titan build specifically, we want endurance charges for our Warcries, which we'll go over soon, but that's why we have enduring impact here. Obviously this is mostly helpful while mapping. I'm not really heavy stunning bosses or anything with this move, but it gives us a 30% chance to gain an endurance charge when we heavily stun a non-unique enemy. Next up is Magma Barrier. Again guys, I personally still like the skill and have found a role for it in this build similar to the last, but if you do not want to run Magma Barrier, that's okay. You can just go with Scavenge Plating, I'd say, because we're armor stacking for survivability on this character. But yeah, Magma Barrier is basically socketed in a way to give us a strong ignite on pinnacle bosses when we set it off. Honestly, very easy to do against most of them in phase 1. It does a ton of damage on this build straight up, and I've actually finished off bosses unexpectedly with this move when it happens to pop off. It's also assisting me with clearing these days since we have a bit more AoE, as I said previously, but it can nuke down some of those hard to kill rares pretty quickly as well. We're also running Herald of Ash now, and I know if you've been following this channel for a while, you know how much of a meme I used to think that ability was, but I can't deny that after the buffs, it's pretty useful at mopping up stragglers while clearing, and is very strong with Magma Barrier, since Magma Barrier hits so ridiculously hard and Herald of Ash's burn damage is affected by overkill damage, which Magma Barrier is very good at inflicting. Resonating Shield, mostly the same as before, pretty much just a vehicle for shield waves from Fortifying Cry, though since we aren't Warbringer anymore, this is our main way of breaking armor. Just something to keep in mind, it's not all of our hits anymore, but this armor break is relevant to our clearing now, since again we want to be generating endurance charges often, and this helps us do so with the armor break 3 support gem, though it's unfortunate because we don't actually get this first benefit here since we are dealing all fire damage, but really we want it for the endurance charge gain, so it's here to stay. And as before, we have it socketed in a way to increase its ignite chance or flammability magnitude so that we can inflict fire exposure on pinnacle bosses as we are breaking their armor, just for a bit of extra damage on our boss killing combo. Alright, so some of the bigger changes here. We have Fortifying Cry, still socketed with second win 3, as we still get a good healing benefit from it, but we just can't spam it for free anymore, so we have to use those 2 cooldown charges wisely. Most of the time. As you can see in the tooltip for this skill and Infernal Cry, both of these shouts cooldowns can be bypassed by expending an endurance charge. The stacking of endurance charges we have going on should make more sense now. So when we bypass the cooldown of the shouts in this way, by expending an endurance charge, we obviously do not get the second win 3 heal. The big nerf to that support gem was that you need to consume a cooldown charge in order to receive the healing, but the healing as it is now is still quite good and worth it in my opinion, and the twice as many cooldown uses bit is actually pretty pretty useful for our shield wall combo, because with this build, I mean, it's possible to one-shot some pinnacles at this point with just one shield wall, but you can obviously use up to 2 at a given time thanks to the cooldown uses granted by this support gem. So Second Wind 3 still works out pretty well for us here, and it actually does still help us with survivability. We're just not, you know, invulnerable anymore. Oh, and real quick, we have Fiery Death socketed here as well, which helps with clearing pretty significantly. I wish it dealt a little bit more damage. 10% of a monster's life is fairly low, but I am surprised at how much this contributes with how many monsters explode from it. And it has decent AoE. I'll often just cut a path through a group and let any monsters chasing me suffer the consequences from this gem, since it has a bit of delay, so it kind of lines up perfectly for this type of clearing. And against bosses, we obviously don't need Fiery Death, so I swap it out with Close Combat for a bunch of extra damage when we hit them with our shield wall combo. Infernal Cry is mostly the same. Similar to Fortifying Cry, you have 2 cooldown uses to use with Second Wind 3, but it does heal a bit more than Fortifying Cry since I have it socketed in a way to cost less health when you cast it, and I essentially use this as a heal while mapping or clearing things, but obviously you should be empowering your shield walls whenever you create them. Again, very important. It adds a ton of damage. Do not forget to Infernal Cry before you shield wall, whether it's during a pinnacle boss fight or out in the field like in a Simulacrum or whatever. Sunder is still here, socketed in a way to speed up its animation and maintain rage stacks, as well as increase its sundered armor debuff duration. We basically only use this ability during pinnacle boss fights to apply sundered armor, which is much stronger than the standard fully broken armor effect and actually applies to our fire damage with this build, so make sure you have the sundered armor debuff up on bosses as often as you possibly can. Shield wall is here, and ironically it hasn't changed much in its purpose since the Warbringer build, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. Here are the sockets. Again, Rigwalds lets us use this much more quickly in weapon set 1, which is our clearing set. A little slower in weapon set 2, but it hits way harder, and you should detonate this with Fortifying Cry most times since you'll create a bunch of shield waves, and it'll hit way harder than if you detonate it with most other skills. But there is a bit of a disclaimer to this that I'll go over in a bit when I talk about Simulacrums. But in any case, the skill is our main pinnacle boss killer, but obviously use this on juiced map bosses as well, or even in a Simulacrum when those 2 bosses show up. Super strong nuke with a good ignite attached to it. We'll see how hard they nerf this or Fortifying Cry next patch. Alright, Herald of Ash. So you guys might have seen my video on this ability a while back, but they have since buffed and fixed this ability, so it has a little bit more AoE now, which is one of the biggest problems that I go over in the older video. And the damage scaling from improving the gem with Gem Cutter's Prisms was fixed. It actually used to decrease the damage before, hilariously. But yeah, it honestly helps a lot with clearing, guys. I cannot deny it. At least on this build. I've really been digging it. I did some testing with and without it, and I decided I wanted to stick with it, and it's socketed in a way to increase the damage and AoE further. Yeah, pretty good ability these days. However, and I will not shut up about this, guys, it is still bugged. I am not kidding. The same problem I pointed out in that video ages ago is still present here. This ability says it ignites enemies based on the overkill damage you deal, but it does not ignite. It simply deals a burning damage over time effect without the ignite tag, so you cannot socket this ability with ignite specialized support gems. Someone get GGG on the phone and get this fixed, please. It's been in the game since 0.1, and there is technically a benefit to this, I guess, since it is not an ignite, means that it can actually stack with an ignite for more damage over time on those stragglers while clearing. Not too bad, but I think I ultimately would want to be able to socket this with ignite support gems like Fiery Death or Wildfire or something, you know. Just a shame, because I kind of like it now, and I want to experiment with it further with the ignite stuff, but I just can't. Yeah, I predict GGG will either fix this to actually ignite, or they'll remove the ignite from the description and just say that it is fire damage over time, a combust perhaps, or something like that. We'll see. Alright guys, last skill, Berserk. Same as before, just boosts our damage up significantly from rage stacks, which we are getting a ton of while we are mapping, and also while we are bossing. A super important ability, really dig it. Socketed with some of the cheaper versions of Vitality and Cannibalism, simply because I don't have the spirit for the stronger versions of those, but you know, they're still great, so there you go. However, the min-max for me cannot help but gem swap a little here, since Herald of Ash is pretty much useless in pinnacle boss fights. I only have Herald of Ash set to be active in weapon set 1, so this means that we have a bunch of spirit that opens up when we are using our bossing set. And I usually swap out these support gems here in Berserk for these 3, stronger version of Vitality, Herbalism in case we need to potion up at any point, and with the 15 spirit left over, I usually throw in Warm-Blooded. This is obviously for Uber Arbiter if something goes wrong with one of your setups or something, but this gem swapping is, it's pretty logical to do against any Pinnacle boss, but to be honest, Zesht and King of the Mist and Olroth, all of them die so quickly that you do not need to do this gem swapping if you don't want to. The only gem swap I'd really recommend is the close combat one for those guys, though it is worth noting that I do cancel out the health drain from Berserk being at maximum rage stacks completely with the better version of the Vitality gem, so a little something to keep in mind. It's ultimately up to you guys whether or not you want to go through the trouble here. And that, everyone, is the skill gems. Hopefully that didn't take too long, but there will be build links in the description box here, so please check them out and refer to them. But real quick, I'm going to go over just how this build plays when it comes to bossing, maps, and simulacrums. Alright guys, we're going to start with the bossing. Against Pinnacles and otherwise, the goal is pretty straightforward. Make sure weapon set 2 is active, close combat is socketed into Fortifying Cry, and swap in those other support gems if you care to. Then you'll start out the fight spamming Resonating Shield to fully break their armor and queue up the boss for a Sunder. And once Sunder armor is applied, you usually have to Resonating Shield a bit more to get near maximum rage stacks. Then, with all of this set up so far, when you see an opportunity to get close to the boss safely, you Infernal Cry, Shield Wall, and Fortifying Cry as quickly as you can, and again, as close to the boss as you can, with your character and where you place the Shield Wall for that close combat bonus. That's pretty much it. I admit there is a bit to set up before you deal the actual damage, but you basically just have to wait for your window. Like if the boss teleports or runs away from your shield wall when you spawn it, it's worth just walking around it, not detonating it, since you want to save your Fortifying Cry and Shield Wave detonations until you are sure they are going to get hit, since we only have 2 cooldown charges for the shout and can't spam it freely anymore. Pretty straightforward. Most bosses will go down pretty easily, again, unless they are super jumpy or are Uber Arbiter, where you may need to set up this combo twice over the course of the fight. But honestly, it's such a hard-hitting combo, you can skip a lot of the mechanics on Uber Arbiter as well, so what can I say? Build is feeling even stronger when it comes to blasting Pinnacles. When it comes to clearing, we use the same abilities as the Warbringer version of the build, but we just have to be a bit more sparing with the Fortifying Cries until you get your endurance charges rolling. But even then, you want to make sure you are being efficient with your shield waves, which honestly is not that hard to do with the assistance from Herald of Ash, Fiery Death, and Magma Barrier. But basically, as you enter a fight, you are just using Fortifying Cry first to get some shield waves stocked up, and then using Resonating Shield to get them out. I'll sometimes glance down at the amount of shield waves that are stocked up from a shout just to get an idea of how many I can use before I have to shout again, but with this build you can always bet that you will have 3 at minimum. So if you are clearing through a less crowded portion of a map, just know that when you shout you are good for 3 shield waves every time. Also, don't forget to use shield charge where it makes sense to for those extra endurance charges, and this skill will also shoot out a shield wave from Fortifying Cry as well, so you can actually start clearing as soon as you collide. Again, the damage on shield charge itself is not very good, but shield wave damage from the Fortifying Cry is always good. If you notice your life taking some hits, throw out an Infernal Cry or 2 to crank it back up. Maybe back off a bit and figure out what's hitting you so hard, but this rarely happens these days since we are so tanky on this Titan and are just seriously obliterating enemies around us very quickly, and honestly it just feels so satisfying clearing with this build. When it comes to simulacrums, make sure you do not have Fiery Death equipped in Fortifying Cry, since these enemies do not leave corpses, and then it's pretty much business as usual. Stick with weapon set 1, our clearing set, since we get a bunch more stun threshold with how our passive skill tree works, and it's pretty smooth sailing. If the bosses show up, I don't even swap weapon sets, honestly. I just go with the Infernal Cry and Shield Wall combo after breaking their armor if I am able. Sunder isn't really necessary and a little dangerous if the situation is hectic. Thankfully, their health isn't too crazy and they are easily heavily stunned. So just try to get those shield walls out quickly and detonate them close to those guys and you'll be just fine. You can even just use shield walls to wipe groups if you find that fortifying is taking a bit too long, which can happen in the latest rounds of a simulacrum. Oh, and as I hinted at earlier, one interesting tip about shield wall here, you can actually detonate your shield walls with resonating shield or the shield wave that is created from it, and it will destroy your shield walls in one tick, but also consume the rest of your stocked up shield waves from an earlier fortifying cry. I find this to be useful in the later rounds when you can't be sure that you'll bypass the cooldown of Fortifying Cry by expending that endurance charge, since the monsters can steal them so quickly when you get hit in those later rounds. So when you really need that shield wall to detonate and shred something, you can tap it with Resonating Shield if you've got some stocked up shield waves from a past Fortifying Cry, and you'll shotgun blast the mobs or boss with the rest of the stocked up empowered attacks as usual, basically meaning you do not need to detonate the shield wall with the Fortifying Cry skill itself, as long as you have some shield waves stocked up from a recent one. And that's how it plays, guys. This is a bit of a news section for me in these videos, so let me know if you find this useful in the comments, and I'll try to include these more thorough how it plays, like step-by-step explanations in future videos, but we'll move on to the passive skill tree for now. Alright guys, not a ton has changed here with the passive skill tree since the last Warbringer build, to be honest, so I'm just going to go over the important stuff here. Obviously the new Ascendancy, and I'll go over the biggest changes from the previous passive skill tree, and some alternatives based on your playstyle or what you think you'd find more useful for certain situations. So basically just personal preference. So, Titan Ascendancy. I feel kinda bad for waiting this long because this Ascendancy is so obviously strong. We obviously go hulking form here, which is just going to be strong on any Titan build. You get 50% more out of all small passives, not notables or pathing nodes, which is still just so much value. Honestly, this is going to be hard to pass up when making future builds. Then we hit the body armor branch here, Stone Skin for 50% more armor from body armor. On this build, we are getting a ton of armor value from just the body armor piece alone. And then the 15% maximum life branch down here, Mysterious Lineage, self-explanatory, that's a ton of life. Totally worth it and helps out our tankiness so much. And we pretty much just ignore the other two branches. We're not really investing into heavy stuns or slams on this build, so we really don't need them. Alright guys, just going to go over the biggest changes here, starting very simply with these two nodes. Should be obvious from what I just said. We are getting a lot of armor value from our body armor, so we want sturdy metal since it's a whopping 80% more from that piece. Yeah, make sure you buy a high armor body armor with your currency. We'll go over that more in a bit, but we're getting so much from just that alone. Other than that, you can see weapon set 1 points are exactly the same here. Scrolling down this way though, honestly, this is very important to me, but I shifted some weapon set 2 points into these 4 nodes here to reduce our rage decay. Upon some very light testing, this is actually way more of an indirect damage boost than it initially seems. Obviously, you have the maximum rage stacks notable here, but what's important is that you don't have to worry as much about maintaining your rage stacks while setting up your boss killing combo. Seriously, even after tapping them with Infernal Cry, your rage starts decaying pretty quickly, sometimes even during your shield wall combo, and you lose out on a bit of damage. So trust me guys, I recommend you try this. You will hit bosses so much harder with your shield wall combos and will be able to shield wall combo back to back without losing rage. While without these nodes, you'd lose 20 to 30 rage stacks between shield walls, which is just like, what, with Berserk 30-ish to near 40-ish% damage just gone. Very strong nodes here, at least for boss killing, which is why these are set to weapon set 2. Oh, and down here real quick, I commented on this before, but you should definitely take these movement penalty with raised shield nodes here for weapon set 1. This makes your clearing speed much faster when you are Resonate shield channeling through big groups. This actually makes a huge difference, and I don't think I'll spec out of these anytime soon with my clearing set. Definitely try this out. Everything is pretty much the same down here from the previous build. Just remember that the Molten One's gift here is very important for this fire themed build, as this is what allows our fire damage to be boosted by Sundered armor. Then I went up here and grabbed some extra armor nodes. Then up here is where I took those 4 weapon set 2 points from to throw into those delayed rage decay nodes we went over before. Bosses are dying so fast now that I just don't feel like these 4 nodes are that useful. The notable is a cool effect though, and still probably useful against something like Uber Arbiter, but even he's been dying kind of fast. So overall, I just don't think it's worth it right now, but who knows, you know, maybe down the line they'll add some tankier bosses, which would make this more relevant again, so it's one that I'm keeping an eye on. I mean, other than that, those are the biggest changes from the previous passive skill tree. Oh, there is one more thing. Let's go over jewels. So I'll use this one down here as an example. I still need to update the rest, but if you recall, we were going for empowered attacks deal increased damage, as well as increased damage against enemies with fully broken armor. I think that the increased damage against enemies with fully broken armor roll on these is no longer that useful, since we're not breaking armor quite as often anymore as a Titan, but they are still very strong jewels against bosses. But for more general purpose jewels that will give you more of a benefit while clearing as well, I think you may want to consider converting those fully armor broken rolls into just you know, standard elemental damage or increased fire damage rolls like this ruby here. Honestly, something I need to test out more, but I think you'd mostly be trading some pinnacle boss killing damage for a bit more clearing damage, essentially, if you went with that route. Hey, real quick, guys, this is post-recording Lex here, as you can tell by the different shirt. I realized I forgot to mention the personal preference parts of the passive skill tree that I mentioned at the beginning of this section, so I'm here to talk about that real quick before my past self moves on. So one option I want to point out to you guys, which I briefly touch upon in my most recent video, are these nodes down here that lead to Urgent Call. So Urgent Call heals for 2% of your maximum life each time you Warcry, which isn't nothing, but it's also not a ton, since Second Wind 3 is essentially healing us for 22% of our life with our respect each time we shout, or each time we consume a cooldown use. But I mostly want to point this out because between these 4 nodes you get a lot of Warcry cooldown recovery rate, which means your Warcry cooldowns will replenish faster and you can use them more often. Just keep in mind that if you are using Second Wind 3, this does reduce the amount of healing that each cooldown use heals, since that healing is based on the cooldown time, with more healing happening if the cooldown is longer, essentially. And you can also grab these 2 nodes here for like 40% increased Warcry cooldown recovery as well. Again, only if you feel like you are struggling with the endurance charges or don't want to use Second Wind 3. And in boss fights in particular, I think cooldown recovery rate is most useful, in case like a shield wall setup gets messed up and you want to have another shout ready sooner rather than later. Oh, and there's one other option when it comes to Warcry cooldowns. You can use a support gem called Enraged Warcry rank 2, I believe, which will consume 15 rage to bypass the cooldown instead of expending an endurance charge. So this is pretty reliable since we generate a ton of rage on this build, but personally, I just like using the endurance charges more, since again, that's a mechanic that is innate to the Warcries themselves, and you also have to give up a support gem slot for this rage consume functionality, so you're losing a little bit of damage there, as well as technically losing more damage since you have to consume the 15 rage as well. So it's just another option I probably should have mentioned in the skill gems section of the video, but personally, I just like rolling with the endurance charges. Also, I may potentially throw 2 points into here at some point. Seems like with our armor stacking Titan getting around 35% more armor between these 2 nodes and some life regen, a little extra strength as well, would be pretty great, especially for just a little extra life sustain as we are using skills with blood magic. I think another thing to point out are these armor nodes here. If you guys lean into life recoup, I'd recommend just grabbing this one down here instead of what I did. I experimented with this one a bit, and even without investing much into life recoup at all, I noticed a little bit of a difference, so it seems like it'd be a no-brainer if you wanted to stack that stat. A member of my Discord actually shared a clip where he was heavy stunned in a Simulacrum, but he had so much life recoup that he was just healing the whole time the mobs were wailing on him. It was pretty funny to see. I think up here, Deafening Cries, I'm a little iffy on. This was more useful as a Warbringer when I could spam shouts before a boss fight for free and stack up that 8% damage over and over. I basically just have this since it's an easy 25% cooldown recovery rate for 1 passive skill tree point, which again is useful for bossing in my opinion, but the 8% more damage per Warcry recently seems better for clearing, since I am no longer spamming it during boss fights as a Warbringer. Yeah, I know it's only 1 weapon set point, but I don't think I'll keep this here for much longer, to be honest. Last thing I'll mention is up here. 2 points will get you 44% increased empowered attack damage, and this notable explosive empowerment, which is basically like a slightly higher chance for fiery death as you are clearing, which is not bad considering it's attached to those damage nodes, and spending 2 more points will get you here extinguishing exhalation. Removing ignites when you Warcry could be pretty great in situations, well, obviously when you get ignited. Obviously, Uber Arbiter comes to mind, as he has a strong ignite if he hits you with that beam move, but also some mobs can inflict some pretty strong ignites out in the field, so honestly, I could see this one being worth the investment. Alright, that's all I wanted to throw in there, passing it back to the original recording. And that's basically the new passive skill tree. I know that this is a bit shorter than usual, but again, check the build links below to refer to the full version of the skill tree if you want to follow this build. But real quick, let's talk about the gear. Alright, real quick I will show you a mouse over of what my set looks like at the moment, but basically things haven't changed a whole lot since the Warbringer version of the build, to be honest. Just some straight upgrades here and there, but there are a few things that we should discuss that are specific to the Titan build. Some of it related to the jewels you might want to aim for in the passive skill tree, but Also some other considerations when it comes to stat priority and gear rolls. So let's start with the chest piece. So some of you experienced players are going to look at this and be like, oh, okay, Lex, but I just want to tell you that you do not need an expensive chest piece for this build. Really, you just need a chest piece with high armor value and whatever resistances you want. Obviously, an elemental damage reduction with armor roll is nice, but don't feel like you have to go crazy and drop 25 divs like I did on this one. I just had a ton of currency and I wanted to buy something nice. Moving on from here, the amulet is particularly important in my opinion. Still have momentum allocated as the quality of life granted by that notable is insane for heavy armor users, and honestly damage is feeling totally fine, so I don't feel the need to anoint a damage node. But yeah, this is obviously another fairly pricey piece. If you are looking to cut costs, just look for a +2 melee skill version instead of +3, and you're already looking at amulets that are significantly cheaper. I think I dropped maybe 10 to 12 div on this one, but again, you do not need to do that. I'd recommend just grabbing one with plus melee skill, some armor rating if you can find it. I unfortunately do not have that roll on this one, it's on my old one. Some maximum life would be good, and whatever resistance you need, you know, maybe some extra spirit, but then you're starting to look at more expensive things. You're getting to like pricey territory there with those rolls all in one amulet, so I'd prioritize the melee skill, elemental resists, and any armor roll essentially, and spirit if you can, but whether it's a bit a bit on the amulet or a bit on the body armor, etc. And those are basically the biggest changes from the previous build, honestly. Obviously, like before, you want a high armor shield for your shield walls and fortifying cries, and also I think it's better to, as I said earlier, prioritize dealing increased damage with empowered attacks rather than damage against fully armor broken enemies. As far as your desecration stuff goes, this is a Kurgle desecration, not an Amanamu one. I wasted an embarrassing amount of divs before I realized this, so if you craft one up on your own, keep that in mind. Second weapon set still has the fully armor broken roll on this weapon, but I am more okay with it on that since this is our boss killing weapon set and they will always have fully broken armor or sundered armor up on them as you are nuking them down, so replacing this one for me was not as high of a priority since it functionally works almost exactly the same as before, damage-wise. And that's basically it. A shorter guide this time around, I think, but I wanted to update you on what I've been running recently. I know the league is slowing down a bit at this point, but I've still been really enjoying it, man. I don't know, Path of Exile 2 is just going to be my main game for a minute. Though I have been dabbling in some other ones. Obviously, the meme that is Mega Bonk is actually really fun. Definitely recommend checking that one out if you are a fan of roguelikes or Vampire Survivors at all. And there are some Souls-likes I'm feeling the need to catch up on at some point, like the new Hollow Knight or Wu Chang even. But let me know if you guys are interested at all in seeing content on any of that, or if you're enjoying any of those games recently as well. But if not, that's fine too. I still plan on playing around with a physical damage version of a shield build next, once I farm up enough currency again to do so. So I hope you enjoyed this build update. I'll leave you with some gameplay of this new build as always, but that's going to be it for now, guys. I will see you in the next one.
What happened? Believe me, you will fall. Exile.